Hey everybody, welcome to the Alone series, season 1, episode 8. We're just a little quick shout out. We're sponsored by wolfdenoutdoors.com. Please go there to check out all the different stuff we've got for outdoors fun. Everything from bushcrafting to survival tools, camping, lots of different fun stuff we've got there. We are going to be going ahead and watching episode 8 today of Alone. The episode's called After the Rescue, which is going to be interesting because I know in general, I'm going to go ahead and click play so we can get through the recap. But I know generally speaking, if you get rescued, you're done. You call for a rescue, you're out. So they actually did a quote. This quote's actually from one of the guys on here, Wayne, who had a bear charge him. And he says, this is the chance of a lifetime, but it's not worth dying for. And see, that's interesting to me, actually, because if it's the chance of a lifetime, it almost feels like it's worth dying for. I mean, if it really is, if that's the chance of a lifetime, I feel like if I was going to be out there, you better medically pull me. Even with a bear, you gotta medically pull me. And the only guy I think who's been medically pulled has been Brant. So, Sam does have a bow. So I don't know if I'm hoping he's hunting. We talked about this in the last episode that Sam caught a mouse and he's been trying to do some trapping for some smaller varmints. But I'd be curious as to how much these guys are actually hunting. I know they just showed Sam has a bow. I thought Lucas had one. They showed him at home with one as he was getting his gear ready, but I don't know that he actually has it. So right now they're saying after 12 hours, the first guy tapped out, which is Josh. Josh tapped out because a bear came and checked out his camp. So and it was funny. It was a mother bear and her cubs. The mother bear is not on the hunt with her cubs. So he left and quit. And then 36 hours, so about a day later, Chris left because there was wolves up and behind him. And he was attacked by a dog as a kid. So the wolves, and they weren't near him. They were up on a mountain. They were up on a ridge behind him. So they were far enough away. They weren't really a threat, but they just got in his head. So this is actually an interview with these guys. So Chris says he's happy that he wasn't first. And I know that's it's funny when they dropped Josh off. You just saw Josh. He was already broken down the moment these guys left. That's the moment those boats took off. Like he was like, "Well, there goes my ride." And he was already tearing up and like struggling. And this is interesting. It really comes down to how well were these guys prepared and how mentally tough are they. Josh probably could have stayed out. Maybe he had the skills. He just didn't have the mentality to stay out there. So that's... The biggest thing I really saw with Josh was... his shelter was not good. His shelter was actually just a lean-to, and lean-tos are okay, but from a defensible position, when you're on an island with like 1,000 bears, it was not a defensible position. So it looks like he grabbed his bear spray. He could have used it. Bear spray works. Bear spray will get a bear out of there. It'll gas you too. So it's rough, but he had his weapons. The interesting part about this, though, is just the different mentalities between these two guys who quit instantly and the guys who stayed. Mitch brought, as you guys remember, Mitch brought a mountain lion within 10 feet of his camp because he was cooking his big salmon right there. All he did was jump in his tent, batten down the hatches, and sleep with his knife, and he went to bed. The wolves that caused Chris to leave, he was all paranoid because they were howling and was worried about it. But Sam was calling to the wolves. So it's very, very different mentality. So these guys are like, well, we're doing it as long as it feels safe. Nature's not safe. Nature's gonna spit you out. It's gonna come at you. So I mean, when you see some of these guys, you kind of I don't know. I kind of understand that they're gonna back out. I mean, so Chris is hearing like the wolves basically go at it. It can be really, really concerning if you don't know how wolves are. Again, I own wolves. I raise wolves. That's why the company sponsoring this is Wolf Den Outdoors. And when wolves play, I have to watch them sometimes because it almost feels like violence. I mean, to be honest though, I will give Chris some credit. Wolves actually scare me more because there's more of them. You could have 3 wolves in front of you trying to confront you and try to hunt you, and then have a wolf in the back. Bears don't hunt in packs. So, I mean, you got one bear, you got one animal to deal with. It's in front of you. That's what you really got to handle. But it's funny. These guys are sitting here. I wonder what they're thinking. I mean, these guys have been sitting there so long. They tapped out day 1, day 2. Now these guys are 30 days in. Like, there's such a difference there. Now they're going to Joe. So Joe tapped out after 4 days, and Joe had a bum rush of things where he was dropped off, was marshy and not a place where he could get water, couldn't get fire started. I mean, he had it rough, so he finally moved over to this other place. He got set up. I thought he was set sweet, and he was just careless. Without his ferro rod, his fire steel, he so Joe's number 3. Joe thought he was first because it was 4 days in, and he was feeling down about it. And they just told him that he was third, and he's like, "Wait, seriously?" So it's just hitting him that he wasn't first. He really thought he was the first guy to quit. But I mean, losing these, it sucks. I mean, it's really. He said it was definitely a problem. I mean, you lose this, you really are down to friction fire. Friction fire, you have to maintain the fire. He had a fire going, but he would have had to have maintained it. He did have a bear. Again, they're showing the big bear that was crossing the river. Funny part was the bear was crossing the river and hadn't even seen him. Hadn't even spotted Joe yet. And I mean, Joe was videotaping his stuff, and then it was fine. He kind of called him, and the bear just didn't really care. I mean, he wasn't showing aggressive. He was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I'm doing my thing. So I mean, that fire steel, I mean, he set it on his jacket, then he picked up his jacket without thinking about it. It looks like it was in some type of case, which almost makes me wonder if it was supposed to be on his belt. And they're asking him, how did he lose it? And he goes, it was stupid. And, I'll be honest with that. The reason I have this one down here right now is I haven't yet found a lanyard. But for me, with this stuff, lanyard, keep it around your neck. Even if it's a long lanyard that goes down long enough that you can, you really think about it. I could strike a fire, kneeling over a fire from right here. So I only need a lanyard that's this long, and it would just sit right here. I mean, and the problem is here is Joe just hit a hard point. While he was looking for it, the more he looks for it, the more he convinced himself he couldn't stay. And that's I mean, that again, that's the mentality aspect we've been talking about in all these episodes, is he got so wrapped up in it and so wrapped up in his mistake of losing it that it hit it. So the next day, 5 days in, 4 guys tapped. Wayne, I'll give credit to. Wayne First of all, I don't know how he got into like what he was doing that he walked into the bear. Like, why was he out at night like that? Because he showed in the video of him running back to his camp. He was a good distance from his camp. He was he was 30, 40 yards away from his camp or more. And it's funny. He goes, the bear wasn't scared of him. Well, the bear wasn't going to be scared of him because he walked up on the bear, and that was the problem. And, he goes, I tried hay bear and it didn't work. It doesn't. The hay bear works if the bear is just kind of meandering and wanders on you. If you've done it and noticed it, doing that, it's kind of the same reason as rattlesnake rattles. It's to scare you off. It's a threat. It's back off. So hey bear is kind of the same thing. A bear doesn't know you're really there until you say that. In his incident, he walked up on the bear, and that's how you do get attacked. That's how you do get startled. You startle the bear, and then the bear will get pissed and get defensive, and that's really the problem he had. So, I mean, Wayne really had a good time of things. I don't know. Like, it wasn't a great time, but there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, right here, this video they're showing of him. He had some big deadfalls where he could make traps. He was talking about, I could make him. I remember this. He was saying he could use this deadfall to make himself a home. But nearby, I guess there was a game trail. To me, the biggest thing with the game trails and with these lean-tos, if you get a fire going near there, the bears ain't going to come around. They don't want to come around the fires. They're going to revert to other game trails and get away from you. Generally speaking, humans are a good way to deter game trails. If you're right next to a game trail, they're going to stay away from you. Oh, for a second, I almost thought he had the same knife I did, but it looks like it'd be a little different. So he's carrying his bear spray on him, which is smart. I would do that too. I mean, I would carry it either on a belt or something where you had ready access to it, because you never know. I mean, he's surviving in. I think Wayne quit after 5 days. Like I said, Wayne had a big black bear charge him, and like consistently charge down and come down into his camp. Like I'd have freaked out. So he was trying to get all his gear moved, and it was late into the evening. He hadn't gotten it moved yet into camp. Okay, so he was just trying to get all his gear positioned into where his tarp was. Funny part is he's like, well, I picked up my axe, so he technically had defense. But I told him I didn't blame him. So, I mean, I don't think that bear was really wanting him to leave. Like, I don't think he was going to continue to be aggressive. Honestly, when you look at the bear's behaviors, I think for the most part, the bear was startled that he walked up. I mean, it's real easy to be pretty quiet in the woods. And if you walk up on a wild animal, they get defensive and they get mean. I mean, I got nervous once. I was out in the woods running, and I run barefoot usually, and came around this big boulder and came face to face with the doe deer. And I froze dead in my tracks. And the reason for it is, even a doe, if she gets mad, she can lash out with her hooves, and deer hooves are real small, and she could actually do some pretty good damage. Oh, shit. One of the rescuers just got hurt. What the hell? He just popped his shoulder out. So one of these rescue guys trying to go get him, because it's at night, they couldn't get out to get to him. The boats weren't willing to go out in the dark. The planes weren't willing to go out in the dark. So these guys had to drive out and hike out, and some dude jacked up his shoulder in the process. So, I mean, I feel bad for those guys. Those guys got to walk through the woods. Yeah, Wayne's sitting there waiting for him, but he's in his camp. He could potentially have fire. I mean, that's scary as hell. Those guys got to walk through the woods, and if they're not careful, they could set off a mountain lion. So yeah, they came and rescued him pretty early on. So if I remember right, after Wayne, it's Brant. And Brant was a quit because he was drinking seawater. And to me, that's a perfectly valid reason to leave. So within 6 days, 5 guys are gone. Half of them are gone in less than a week. So Brant and Wayne, I felt like they really had good excuses for leaving. I mean, part of this thing with Brant, though, Brant didn't do a lot of recon on the water he was drinking. He did not. I mean, it was funny. After he got sick, he did. After he got sick, he started walking up the creek in the marsh. And the problem was the ocean goes up and then flows back out. I mean, that's obviously salt water. He wasn't boiling it. He was filtering it through moss rather than boiling his water. He didn't go check. I mean, once he went up the river, he suddenly found dead fish and like all this stuff in the water. Like it was really obvious he was in a bad situation and hurting. And I mean, he drank like 2-3 gallons of it. And that's enough to really wear you down and get at you. I mean, it's funny. He goes, the emotional part of it, and there's a lot of stuff. I mean, mentally and emotionally, we repress a lot of emotions. We hold them in. And he just said, it brings it out and makes it harder. It's funny. They go, well, we thought it might help people, like they could deal with it. He goes, no, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to face up to that stuff. And he just got told that 4 other people quit, so he's 5. And he's like, wow. So I hope he's feeling better. He looks like he's feeling a little bit better. So, I mean, this discussion with all of them about this stuff and what they're doing, he's actually feeling aware that he doesn't have skill sets. I think these guys all camp and stay local onto the island until the very end. So they keep everybody. It's not like you get sent home, which is weird. I don't know how this works because they're all like, well, we miss our families. But they're all here at this little camp, so it doesn't feel like they're going to be there. So again, his problem here is he's filtering stuff through moss. So I mean, when you start having hallucinations and stuff, I think that would be aware. That's clue number 1. He probably should have called in a little earlier, to be honest. Or at least when you start feeling that way, go check out where your water's coming from. I mean, it's really problematic what he did, and he really hosed himself with the water situation. And that's what I found watching this show, and you guys will remember this. Most of these guys had to move. The guys who were out there for long enough, Joe had to move. There was no place he could get water, and he couldn't get fire. He moved across the river. Wayne was the same. Wayne moved. I mean, who else? Mitch moved. Mitch didn't have water where he was at, so he built a boat, went across the river. So, okay, now they're up to the 6th guy. So, 7 days. 7 days and 6 guys tapped out. The other 4 guys lasted for a freaking 30 days. So, it's such a rapid difference. So 60% of the guys made it a week, or less than a week. The other 4 guys have all been out there a month now. It's such a rapid and obvious difference. So he said he doesn't believe that 5 people tapped out and he's number 6. He goes, "There's no way. It's been a week." Yeah, and in a week, all 6 people tapped out. So this is the problem. When they dropped them all off right in the beginning, they all had problems. I love Dustin's knife. It's a very interesting shaped knife. So I'm curious as to the benefits of that. It almost looks almost like a kukri, but it's not. Alan's got a kukri. So Dustin's problem, and I actually critiqued him a little bit at first, but I finally saw this. I thought his shelter didn't have a back wall to it, and this is the problem I have with A-frame shelters, is generally your back door's open. So you can only look in one direction for your security. And for something like a mountain lion could easily come in your back door very, very quietly and be on you before you knew it. But Dustin actually did put up logs and walls on the back of his A-frame, so props to him for that. I mean, he was thinking through that as a problem. I mean, these guys all learned quite a bit. This is pretty interesting to see what they're doing. I mean, I wonder what it does to their mentality. These guys are all out here. So it's now switched to these 4 guys. They're still out. Mitch, Sam, Lucas, and Alan. I don't know who wins, to be honest. I don't think I've actually watched this season all the way through. So Mitch came out. He was where it's raining a bunch. The nice part with this rain is if you set up your shelter right, you can start gaining some water. Mitch has done some fantastic things that I've seen. Rather than, he had some problems getting fire going, but one of the things he did that was really, really good is, so Mitch opted not to bring out his axe or his bow, which makes me wonder what he brought out. I mean, when I took the alone test, most of what I brought out was going to be cutting tools, what I put on there, because to me, that's what you need to make everything else. Having an axe does allow you to do different things. It'll allow you to make a bow. But yeah, I mean, Mitch was smart with his defense. He kept a headlamp on so he could hit it with the light, blind whatever was trying to come into his tent, and then stab and attack it, which is good. I mean, you think about a deer in headlights on the road, they freeze because they can't see and their eyes haven't adjusted and they don't want to move. And that can be the same with predators and everything, so he's protected. I mean, he struggled. I was worried Mitch wasn't going to find water and was going to take himself out. But he ended up building this. It's a coracle type boat. It's a round boat. And it's funny, the difference between him and Lucas. Lucas built a big canoe that's pretty intricate. He built a paddle. For the most part, Mitch just built a round. Basically, he built a bunch of branches in a nest and wrapped the nest in a tarp and then kind of floated almost like being on a tube and used a big pole to kind of steer himself rather than having a paddle. But he's been... I mean, right now, Mitch is hurting. He got out the gill net, which was good. It actually looks like he set up the gill net kind of shallow and like a little bit loose. I mean, that might have hurt him a little bit, especially if the river's snapping and could pull it out. That might be why he lost it. So, I mean, and this is another part I thought Mitch was going to lose it. When it was his little girl's birthday, that can be... I mean, it's like her 4th birthday or something, 3rd or 4th birthday. I don't remember my birthdays at that age. And if he's out there trying to get... I mean, $500,000 is a big amount of money for a family. So he got this giant fish, Again, roasted it. To me, I think soup's the way to go. You boil in clean water so you're getting nutrition and water in. And one of the problems with roasting any type of meat like this is fat loss. The fat and the oils are going to drip out and drip into the fire and onto the ground, and you're going to lose a lot of that oil. And the oil is where the calories come from. Fat has 9 calories per gram, and protein and carbs only have 4. So you're getting double the energy for the same weight of fat versus protein and carbs. And so for me, I'd rather make a stew, because if you stew up a big fish like that, a big salmon, all the oils, when they do cook out of the meat, they're in the broth. And so you get this salmon broth that you can drink and do. So he's out now. What's interesting, that was day 25 that he said he'd be done. And I think now we're up to past day 30. So we found some method of getting fish. So he's still out there. So Alan, I love Alan. When you see him out, you can see he's got a little bit of a pudge to him. He's a little bit bigger. Day 30, he is definitely different. Alan's just been the guy. I love his personality in this whole thing. I mean, he quotes poetry, and he does it in this kind of gruff voice that makes you kind of nervous. I love his shelter. He created a shelter. He basically used this deadfall tree. And, he got up a tent. He got up a more primitive shelter where he was using... he got fired day 2. I remember that was awesome that he got that. And again, the big difference and what I feel bad about these guys, I don't know if this was a rule for season 1, but they didn't have 6-inch ferro rods. Even the one Alan was using was like this big. So to get a bunch of sparks, you really have to hit it a bunch of times. So you might hit 10, 15 strikes just to get a single fire. So that's pretty rough. So, I mean, he got water pretty quickly. Alan's really had a good time of it. He's been a decent forager, found a banana slug, which is nasty, but I guess he said it tastes like shrimp, so do what you got to do. He's found a lot of seaweed, kelp. He's out. He's got all these tidal pools he's out exploring, which tidal pools are a great place to find stuff trapped in it. He's so freaking funny. He's like, oh, I'm dancing. One of the other things I love about him is he has a kukri. And it's one of those knives that's really interesting, and I'd like to own one, actually, and just see how they work. Because it's a very utilizing knife that's almost a machete, and you could use it like a machete, so you can use it for processing a lot of wood. You can whittle with it. You can do a lot of things. And the way he's got this set up, he set up good wood walls. He's got this tree basically gives him a cave. He does all these weird things where he sings. And what's interesting about these guys is when he sings and stuff like that. Like, I know he's trying to keep himself happy. The biggest thing to me when I see people do that is they just go, well, A, they're letting bears know they're in the area, but they might also be scaring off game. The other thing he did that was genius is he set up a cooking camp. This is something Mitch didn't do. He built himself a secondary camp, I think a couple 100 yards away from his other camp, and that's what you're supposed to do. In bear territory, you need to have a cooking fire, at least 100 feet away from your shelter. Otherwise, if you cook at your shelter, you're going to bring in a bear. So, he's in a pretty small... This is one of these things about these shelters. A lot of them, they're very small, and I understand why they are. But there's different things they can do here. For me, I'm really a big fan of I'd like to try, if I was out in a place like this, to construct a pit house. That's one of these things about these pit houses. Like, you could get a pretty decent pit house built pretty quickly. It would keep you warm. They're very secure from like bears and wolves and stuff, so you'd be a lot more secure. And it might take a couple weeks of solid work to do, but these guys have been out here for a month now, so they'd be good. So now they switched over to Lucas. Lucas has had a lot of ups and downs. To be honest, he's a lot more resilient than I thought he'd be. I thought he was going to quit pretty quickly. So again, Lucas got running water, found running water while he was out moving across his property. So he got set up. He got fire day 3. His shelter was interesting. He started with a little bit of an A-frame, but then what he did with it is he actually took it, and rather than being an A-frame, he opened up one side to give himself a flat, which protects his fire from the rain. There's a lot of these things I thought he was done. He decided he wanted to build a cabin, and so he dropped all these giant trees. I mean, these are big freaking trees he was dropping. There's so much work that went into them. I know he wanted to feel secure, but the sheer amount of calories this dude expended for this, and he's skinny as it is. And that's kind of one of those interesting things is when you look at somebody like Alan, Alan's a bigger guy. Sam had a bunch of weight on him. It gives their body, once their bodies start processing their own fat and realizing they're kind of not eating much and going into basically ketosis, they have a lot of fat to work from. I mean, if you got a pound of fat's 3,500 calories and you burn 2,000 calories a day, you might lose a pound or so every couple of days without food. So if you're 40 pounds overweight, before you even hit your weight you're supposed to be at, you're going to be, 40 days technically that you could burn through stuff before you're even down to your normal weight, not even underweight. And Lucas is already a pretty skinny guy. But that also means he does consume less calories when he does stuff. And to give him props, I mean, this canoe he made was pretty good. I mean, the only real problem he has with it is the shape of it. And that's just, he made it a very flat bottom boat. And I understand why he did it. He wants it to be strong and different things like that. And he probably doesn't know much about boat construction. So a flat bottom boat, especially a canoe or a kayak that's flat bottomed, is going to be very slow in the water, hard to maneuver. But I mean, he did good. And one of the nice parts about what he did with this is he can haul the canoe out, and so he can hike it places he wants to go because he didn't attach the tarp to it. The tarp just wraps around it. So that gives him some stuff. And I think that's honestly given him a bit of an advantage here. He's been able to get out, explore some areas. He got to another beach where he was able to dig up a bunch of clams. I think they were butter clams, and a single butter clam is like having an egg. And eggs are the ultimate survival food to me. They're high fat, high protein, and so these clams would be good. I mean, he's stuck out at. I've been surprised. There's a lot of times where he's been crying or having a hard time, but this dude's a lot tougher than he gives appearance to and what they've shown him as. I mean, it's sadly a lot of this stuff and a lot of the film almost portrays him as somebody who seems very weak, but he's out here 25, 30 days and hasn't given up. So I'll give him props. He's hung in there. I actually really like Lucas because he built the boat, which is what I would have done. So that's definite props to him. So Sam's a funny guy. Sam's funny. I like the beard he's got now. I mean, 30 days in, you definitely. I mean, you can see if you look at how this is day 1 video. He's got some weight on him. You look at his video, day 30. I love this. Day 2, when all the wolves came in and Chris quit. Chris was scared of him. Mitch was even a little bit nervous about him when he heard him. Sam's over here howling and going like, "This is awesome." I just love Sam. Sam makes me laugh. Sam got smart for water. It's interesting what these guys all do for water differently. Sam's trying to catch water from the rain. And in other areas, this might not help. You're not going to get a lot of water. But in Vancouver Island, I think one of the statistics said in the first 15 days they were there, it rained 13 out of the 15 days. So it actually gives him a pretty good opportunity to collect a fair amount of water. The only real downside to the way he has it is he can only catch how much water falls in this much area. if he'd had a way to maybe lash together something like to give him access to that full tarp, that'd probably help him a bit more. But I mean, he was at pretty high risk for a couple of things a few times. I mean, the storms that came in, I was worried about him. He was going to go nuts. So he's been out foraging. All these little crabs. I don't know what you could do. I don't know much about crab, to be honest. I know like the big ones, but these aren't king crabs. These are little. And when I look at it, it almost looks like Sam's eating the whole thing. So I wonder if these are like soft shells. If these small crabs their shells get soft and you can eat them. I actually don't know. I'd like to look that up. You learn a lot actually watching what these guys do, like how they get food and how they do things. I mean, one of the things I honestly thought was going to break Sam is missing his family. His wife is pregnant right now with his son. I mean, if they're out there, I don't know how far along she is. I mean, because that's really, once it gets closer to, and some of these things he goes, when I think about it, it tears me up and my days here are numbered. But that was day 14. He's still there 2 weeks later. So he was able to grab a giant salmon, which is good. I mean, that's the thing. Like, a bunch of these guys got some pretty good food. You gotta make it. You can only do 3 weeks without food. So he picked up a salmon a couple weeks in. He just picked up a small mouse. But it's all right. So we got 3 episodes left. This is going to end up episode 8. I thought episode 8 was going to be talking about their frozen stuff, but it's actually revisiting the past guys, talking about the journey of the guys who are out there. Again, these guys are headed out into the winter months, so that's going to make it more of a challenge. Stay warm, stay dry, and to find food. Finding food is going to be a lot harder as it gets cold, so it'd be interesting. I wonder what happens, like the clams on the beaches and stuff. I mean, like Lucas went out and was able to dig up a bunch of those butter clams, and I wonder, like, what happens when it gets cold? Do those all die off? Like, do they dig down deeper? I'm just wondering. Oh, shit. They just showed something with Lucas, and it looks like there's a bird out who's actually trying to take advantage of his fishing efforts. If he gets lucky, the bird will be stuck in his traps, and he can kill it and eat it. And that looked like a big pelican, and I'm sure that's a lot of meat. I mean, this cold's going to be brutal to them. I'm real curious to just see what goes on. Sam's little shelter is, again, this is another problem with the A-frames. Sam's got an A-frame, but he's got his fire in his shelter to keep him warm, which is good. But the smoke only goes one of 2 places, out the front door or out the back, and so it can get real smoky and real hard on him. And to me, when I see stuff like that, I'm like, that's just rough, man. That can be really, really, that smoke can be hard. And that's why I talk about the pit houses. So a pit house is 4 central posts that are tied off and lashed off in a square. And then you take a whole bunch of poles. And I'm actually looking right now. Lucas has a bunch of poles. So it looks like these guys have the opportunity to get these poles pretty quickly. Lucas is going to try to make a yurt. So that's kind of the same idea as almost a yurt. So like a yurt or a pit house, I would actually go for a pit house in a situation like this. I'm not sure how he's going to construct a yurt. So that pit house, once you have those 4 center posts, you take all these poles and just line the poles all the way around. You're basically making a wood teepee. And on top of that, you can throw mud or branches. It's usually good to do mud if you can. I mean, you can really put out mud and everything. I would chink it with mud if I can. If not, just cover it with a crap ton of branches and basically just make this giant dome. You can either have a front entrance or if you built it strong enough, your only entrance is up over the top and down via ladder, and that's actually going to be really bear proof because the only bears aren't going to come up and go in a hole like that. But it's more work to do that. You got to make a ladder, which is going to be harder. So it looks like Sam's out hunting with a bow, and this becomes one of these problems with these guys: is how long can you be out there? You can make a bow pretty quickly. So I wonder how much these guys. Lucas has a yurt that actually looks pretty decent. They showed a little clip of it. I'm excited for these next couple episodes to see what happens. There's only 3 left. And so I'm really, really curious to see, what's going to happen. This is going to be interesting. All right, so that's going to wrap up today's episode for episode 8. We're going to pop over to episode 9 next time, so we'll look forward to seeing you all then. Please leave comments below, like, subscribe, follow us for more adventures, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks. Have a great one.